This is a message. Whoa, this is a message from our Mother Earth.
Walk with me, my little child, to the forest of denial. Speak with me, my only mind. Walk with me until the end and make the forest turn to sand. You took the legend for a fall. You saw the product. Why can't you see that you are my child? Why don't you know that you are my mind? Tell everyone in the world that I'm you. Take this promise to the end of you. Walk with me, my little friend. Take this promise to the end. Speak with me, my only mind. Walk with me until the time and make the forest turn to wine. You took the legend for a fall. You saw the product. Why can't you see that you are my child? Why don't you know that you are my mind? Tell everyone in the world that I'm you. Take this promise to the end of you.
Sarah, who's lighting our chalice today?
Connor will be lighting the chalice this morning.
We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church in Bridgewater. My name is Eileen Heine, and I've been a member here for 16 years. I'm currently president of the Parish Committee. One of the things I like most about First Parish is how church brings us together to share the talents of our members in so many ways. We had a wonderful example of that this weekend with the performances of The Night Thoreau Spent in Jail. For those of you who were privileged to see it, it was an entertaining and thought-provoking play, and it showcased the hard work and many talents of so many of our members. Big thank you to all who participated. First Parish Bridgewater is a welcoming congregation. We proudly fly the rainbow flag to symbolize our welcome to people of every description. We have a dynamic religious education program, which all children are invited to join later in the service. If you are new to First Parish, we hope you enjoy your visit with us today. We encourage you to sign the guest book at the table at the rear of the sanctuary. And if you wish to receive our monthly newsletter, please be sure to include your email address. We invite you to join us for coffee, snacks, and conversation in the Upper Parish Hall following the service through these doors. Our service this morning is being recorded for Bridgewater Cable TV, but the camera will be turned off during the sharing of joys and concerns to preserve your privacy. Thank you for joining us today. Your presence here makes a difference. Please now, we invite you to greet your neighbor.
You know, while you're going back to your seats, this building is going to kind of tilt in this direction and towards the back. If any of you would be willing to come up front, that would be wonderful as you make your way back. As we know, Unitarian Universalists are like herding cats. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Our opening hymn is number 175. We celebrate the web of life. Let's join together in singing. Please rise as you're willing and able. Number 175. Let's join together in the affirmation of our covenant. You'll find the words in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. Children, come on down for our children's story. Tom's going to tell us about Earth Day. Come on down. Earth stuff. Earth stuff. Okay. Well, that's why I was waiting for you to say.
Yeah, it was good.
Hi. How you guys doing? Fist bump? Thank you. Thanks. See you later. So 2 geese were flying north because they fly south for the winter, and do they take the train back, or how do they get back? So they fly back. So they were flying north, and one goose's name was Joe, and the other goose's name was Joe. And that's how they become good friends, because they both had the same name. So they said, oh, hey, what's your name? Oh, my name's Joe, your name. And so they always hung out together, and they've been doing this for a while, so they're not young geese. And they're flying along, and Joe says to Joe, let's take a break, huh? We know where these guys are going to stop for the night. We'll catch up with them later. So they kind of veer off the crowd, and they go down, and they land down in a lake or a pond, and one of them says to the other one, "These trees look so much different from down here." And Joe says, yeah, it took me a long time to learn about trees, but I have learned some things about trees. And the other Joe says, yeah, and some of them in the winter time when it gets cold, they lose all their leaves and they look completely different. And the other Joe says, yeah, and other ones, they don't lose it. And all winter long, they're green. And the first Joe said, yeah, if I was like a bird that lived in a tree, I would like have 2 different houses. I would have one in the tree with the leaves in the summer, and then in the winter, I would go into the tree that didn't lose its leaves or needles, so it would protect me from the cold and the wind and the blow. And they both laughed and said, yeah, that's what I'd do too. Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be great. And the other, and then Joe said, do you know about how the roots of the tree? And Joe said, no. And he goes, I was friends with a flying squirrel one time, and he taught me, he knew a lot about trees, that flying squirrel, and he told me that the roots, the tree gets all its nutrients from the ground, right? It's for the roots. But what the flying squirrel told him is, the other part of that is the tree is actually changing the way the ground is. I said, what are you talking about? It's just the roots are just going down into the ground. What? He said, yeah, but what you might not think of a little bit is when all those leaves fall off the tree, they don't stay like that all the time, like a carpet of leaves. They break down and they slowly go into the soil, and they change the makeup of the soil where the tree is actually living. So with some trees, this is what the flying squirrel told him. His name was Joe too. He said with some trees, because of the leaves that come from the actual tree that's now growing here, that type of tree will never grow there again. So there are some trees, and their own young trees won't grow underneath that tree. Because maybe that tree likes sun instead of shade. But now that this tree is growing up there, there's no more sun. The tree is blocking the sun, so now there's shade. So the young tree that would be like that, a sapling of that same type of tree, wouldn't grow there. Because the tree is now changing the soil as much as the soil is giving nutrients to the tree. And the different nutrients in the soil that come from the rocks in the soil and the water coming through the rocks in the soil feeds the tree. So you could have the exact same tree, and it would grow in one spot, and it wouldn't grow 100 feet away. And Joe said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, that's how it is with trees. The more you learn about trees, the more you learn about how the earth works and how important it is for everything that goes into the ground and everything that we take out of the ground. And how important it is to be careful with how we understand the earth, and how important it is to learn more and not decide that every tree is the same and any tree could grow anywhere and the ground's the same and you could plant any tree and it could grow anywhere." And for some reason I brought these. Do you know what that is? Do you know where that came from? You can have it. It won't hurt you. I'm going to pass one around to everybody. Okay, you want one? Yeah. So this will be the last part of my story. What are we going to call these? Somebody? Pine cones. That's a pretty good name, although I don't think it's a pine tree. But that's what we could all understand. And you know what's inside these, right? Let's not, because the custodian is a friend of mine and has the same name I have. So we won't tear them open. But inside these are the seeds. You know that, right? There's seeds inside here. So here's a story that you learn when you've been around forever like me. That tree out the window is where these came from. So on the ground, if you want to go out later, you can, as long as your parents are with you. And you look around under that tree, and you'll see a whole bunch of these. And some of them you can kind of look and say, "Oh, that's not very decayed. That must have just landed there yesterday." And other ones are a little bit more beat up, and you can tell they've been there for a while. So that's an example of what I was talking about. These are now becoming part of the ground outside, which it wouldn't happen if that tree wasn't growing there. So here's the other funny part of that story. That tree was one of two trees that a person here in the church gave to the church to provide some shade on this side of the building. The other tree was planted about 20 feet away and didn't make it. So you've got two of the exact same trees planted within 20 feet of each other, and for whatever reason, maybe something in the soil 20 feet away didn't feed the other tree enough, and it didn't thrive. It didn't die immediately. It didn't jump out of the ground. But it didn't last very long. It maybe lived for maybe 4 years. But that tree has probably been there for 30 years. So it's just another example of sometimes we think things are simple. This is a tree, it grows here, it could grow there. It could grow. No, not necessarily. It depends on a lot of different things. Sunlight, shade, water, the nutrients in the soil, the rocks in the soil, the water moving through the soil. So the more we learn about how all these things work, the more we can understand the earth. I guess that's it. Okay, thanks for listening, and you can hold on to that if you want. You don't have to. If you want to give it back to me, you can put it up here on the stool. And now it's time to go to RE. Thank you.
of you remember there's an album that Arlo Guthrie and Pete Seeger did called Precious Friends? It's a great album. Any fans of Arlo and Pete here? Yeah. So in the middle of the concert, Arlo's going on, as he often does, and he's telling some story or other. And halfway through, he says, I know I'm supposed to be singing, but you know, you can't always do what you're supposed to do. And I know it's time for joys and sorrows, but you can't always do what you said you were going to do. Actually, I think Henry David Thoreau would probably agree with that. How many of you came to the night that Henry Thoreau spent in jail? And how many of you were part of that? Why don't you all stand up and let's thank him for holding up one of our Unitarian Universalist heroes. So actually this is a kind of a joy and a sorrow. I don't want to be about inside baseball, but there's been some turmoil in our Unitarian Universalist Association, and I thought we should talk about it just a little bit. What happened is kind of complicated, but essentially what happened is that there was an opening at one of the senior levels of the organization, and a white minister was hired instead of a person of color who was a religious educator. It happened that night, some of the religious professional people of color were gathering, and they said, seems to be a pattern here. It turns out that white folks are being asked to lead our denomination. We are trying to promote anti-oppression and anti-racism. Maybe this is a point where we need to have a conversation. And so the conversation broke out, and since then our president has stepped down, as well as the chief operating officer and the head of congregational life, who was the one who did the hire. And then all hell broke loose. And there have been conversations in the association all around. There's an enormous amount of stuff on the website, and Facebook has been lighting up with this story. And I don't want to go into the details of the story. 4 of us were actually at the New England Regional Assembly yesterday, Frank, Eileen, David, and Rachel. And you can talk to me or any of them if you want to know more of the details. It's complicated because it's a personnel, it's a hiring issue. And there are different stories, different frames of reference. What I want to talk about is my reaction, because I think it may be something that others have been feeling. Part of my reaction was just the facts, the story itself, but part of it was that the UU Ministers Association Facebook lit up, and there were conversations, and some of the conversations made me feel unwelcome, made me feel as a white male like I wasn't with it, like I wasn't needed or wanted. And I got really upset. I had a temper tantrum. And actually one night after I was reading way too much on Facebook, I had trouble sleeping. Fortunately, the next day, Rachel and I had a meeting. And we kind of went on and on for a couple hours. By the end of it, what I realized was that the hurt that I was feeling, the resentment, the anger, the sense of not being welcome, was actually something that was felt by other folks and had been felt for a long, long time. And I kind of woke up with that. I went to our ministers' cluster meeting with Rachel on Thursday. We were talking about it. One of the things that came up, one of the women ministers turned to me and said, "You've always felt safe among your colleagues here, among ministers." I said, "Sure." She said, "I've never felt safe. I've never felt safe being accepted as a woman minister. I've never felt safe being accepted as a mother, being accepted with a family which has one African-American child and the other's white. I've never felt safe." She says, "I'm getting to feel more safe. We're very good friends, but suddenly here I am feeling like an outsider." And that's the feeling that other folks, that people of color have been having for a long time. We like to think of ourselves as folks who are and have been anti-racist for a long time, we like to think of ourselves as having been in favor of abolitionism. We like to think of ourselves as being progressive, and we ask ourselves, so why are we having this conversation again? And why use the language of white supremacy? That really got me. I was upset. I was angry. So if any other rest of you have been feeling a little upset or angry, I'm with you. But it turns out there's more to the story. We're celebrating our 300th anniversary. We like to think about Thoreau. We like to think about Emerson, who spoke up eventually, gradually about slavery. We like to think about Theodore Parker, who resisted the fugitive slave law for a very long time. But there are other stories, and in fact, the reality is that most Unitarian churches opposed abolition. Now, we're celebrating our 300th anniversary, and it just happens that David ran across a story in our history about one of our ministers. He served us from 1845 to 1851. His name was Reverend Claudius Bradford, and here's what he did wrong. He spoke up against the fugitive slave law from this pulpit. This church had been built by then. And he said, with respect to the fugitive slave law, the black law, some have significantly termed it, nobody could suppose that I could offer any other opinion than to oppose it. It's my duty to stand up for the higher law. It is said that this fugitive slave law must be obeyed, even though it means that we must become slave hunters and slave catchers ourselves, or else we must see it go on hopelessly, helplessly, in silent. We must see our fair New England turned into a hunting ground for slaves. This black law is black indeed. Whenever it's made perfectly clear to us that the law of God commands us to do one thing and the law of man another, we are never to hesitate for a moment. Not for a moment, for we ought to obey God rather than men. That's great. We can be proud of that. And what did the congregation do? They turned their backs on their minister. They drove him from the pulpit. This was in 1851. He lost his parish, his home, and his livelihood. This building was raised in 1845. Bridgewater was a town that depended upon cotton. We had a cotton gin in town. We were central to the creation of fabric. Unitarians were deeply involved in the cotton trade, in the shipping trade, and so on. And it is said that the Universalist bells rang out for freedom, but the Unitarian bells were silent, being stopped up with cotton. So this story goes to the sinews not only of our congregations and organizations, but even of our buildings. Got me thinking. Got me realizing that I don't like the language of white supremacy in our Unitarian Universalist Association. But this building was built in part by folks who benefited from slavery. And so it's kind of in our bones. I was reminded of something that came up in the women's movement when women were trying to find their place in our ministry and in our denomination. There's a song in our hymnal, "We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle." And the third verse says, "We will all do our own naming." And made me think maybe my response to that name is not what has to happen. Maybe I need to listen to people of color in our leadership, in our denomination, and let them take more leadership on this question. Because it's pretty clear that my impulses are not quite reliable. Now, we've been asked by the leaders of color in our denomination to have a workshop on white supremacy, and we're going to do that in our service of May 7th. I'm not the best person to lead it. My reactions are Well, they're built in. I'm an older white male. I've got my perspective. I've got my frame. So I've asked a couple of folks to help us. Vernon and Rachel and Tony and Michaela and anyone else who wants to help us figure out how to do this, I would welcome you to join us after our service. We're going to brainstorm and try and figure out how to do it and take it seriously. And as I say, if you felt resentment or anger or incomprehension or whatever, I've been there. So we're in this together. Let me light a candle of sorrow, because not all of our history, not all of our actions, not all of our feelings are as positive as we wish they were. And a candle of joy, because we're able to have this conversation. And we're able to have this conversation in a spirit of love for one another. Let's not have anybody excluded. We're all in this together. We're all starting from where we're starting from. And we've all had reactions and feelings, and this is about trying to learn and trying to speak the truth in love to one another. Sometimes music works better for that. And I thought it might be nice to sing a hymn, number 1053, How Could Anyone? And this hymn basically is a kind of commitment. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? And I'd like you to kind of sing it thinking of one another, thinking of our association, thinking of people of color, white folks, colored folks, black folks, white folks, Latinos, gay, lesbian, straight, transgender. Let's try and sing it thinking of all of the many differences, and we are all in it together, and we're all beautiful. Please stand as you're willing and able, and let's sing. Return to regular order. Eileen, Joyce, and Cyrus, please be seated. Joys and sorrows are so finely woven in our lives. We're so grateful that we can bear them together. Let's join together in our music for meditation. Comfort me. The words are in your order of service. invite you to a time of meditation and prayer. Begin by simply breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. Notice the air as it goes into your body. Just quietly breathing. Try breathing in a way that your abdomen is involved, your diaphragm. See how different that feels. Now just return to your normal, comfortable way of breathing. Plant your feet firmly on the floor. Know that this sacred space that we share is grounded in the earth. The earth is sacred. Take your attention upward to the sky, the sun, the stars, the clouds, this whole great cosmos. The sky is sacred. Well over half of our bodies are made up of water. See if you can feel the flow of that liquid through your body, pumping of your heart, taking it to every tendril of your being. We are kept alive by water. Water is sacred. We're told in the book of Genesis that God breathed life into the first human. Breath is life, sacred life. The Hindu scriptures teach that the breath is the thread that connects the self, the Atman, ourselves, to the greater self, the all, the Brahman, sacred breath. We share the air that we breathe together. This place and this community is sacred. And not only here, but everywhere. We share the air with every person on the earth, with all the animals and birds. Everything that breathes shares this, our sacred breath. The air is sacred. Let us carry our awareness of all of this sacredness with us every day, wherever we are. Amen. Time now for our offering and offertory. We'll be sharing our offering with the Natural Resources Trust, Kids to Camp, from our Green Sanctuary Committee. Please give generously. Take out your hymnals and turn to number 551 in the back for our responsive reading this morning, number 551, Earth Teach Me, from the Ute Indians of North America. Earth, teach me stillness as the grasses are stilled with light. Earth, teach me caring as parents who secure their young. Earth, teach me limitation as the ant which crawls on the ground. Earth, teach me resignation as the trees which die in the fall. Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. We're going to omit the hymn number 1000. Actually, I'm doing it as a favor for Tony. And in the interest of time, you don't need to worry. I'm not going to preach as long as the sermon in 1851 that got one of my predecessors fired. Stephen Mitchell has translated many pieces of sacred writing. The Tao Te Ching is one of my favorites. This is from his translation of the Psalms, Psalm 8. Unnameable God, how measureless is your power on all the earth, and how radiant in the sky. When I look up at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon, and the multitude of stars, what is man that you love him, and woman that you gladden her heart? Yet you made us almost like the angels and crowned us with understanding. You put us in charge of all creatures and placed your whole earth in our hands, all animals, tame and wild, all forests, fields, and deserts, even the pure air of the sky, even the depths of the ocean. Unnameable God, how terrible is our power on all the earth. How terrible is our power on all the earth. Our power, human power. And that power, as it turns out, is not equally distributed among all of the parts of the web of life of which we are, in fact, only a small part. If any of you read The Elephant Whisperer, which is the One Book, One Community selection for the spring, you know that elephants, mighty as they are, have suffered devastating losses as a result of human activities. And the story is also one of hope. It's also about how some folks have intervened by creating game preserves where a few of the remaining elephants can be protected. The rate of extinction in the other living parts of our web of life is catastrophic. This has been referred to in some quarters as the time of the sixth extinction of non-human beings on this earth. The most pressing issue of our time is that our climate is changing right before our eyes, right here in our backyards and in the Arctic, where the ice is receding to the point where it will become navigable in the summer. In Antarctica and Greenland, where vast glaciers on land are melting and will cause significant rises in sea levels. The rise threatens all the coastlines of the world and will completely inundate some islands. And the weather itself, which is bringing both droughts and devastating floods, as well as changes in the seasons that challenge the life of native plants, the animals, and the birds. We're living in a time when our earth is under assault. The earth needs a visit to the emergency room, as the cover of your order of service suggests. Nor are the effects of these changes equally distributed among the peoples of the earth. Climate change has devastated significant areas of land that can no longer sustain farming, with the result that many millions of people are being displaced and becoming migrants, and many more will be affected in the near future. And in fact, we can see in the origins of the Syrian civil war some of the effects of a devastating drought that happened in 2011 and drove many people off of their farms and into the cities, and thereby contributed to the unrest that ultimately led to that war. The devastation of Hurricane Katrina affected disproportionately the people of color in New Orleans. Hurricane Sandy in New York also affected many poor communities along the coast. So as the oceans rise at an accelerating rate, millions more poor people will be displaced and will not be able to find places to live. They don't have the means to go to some other place and buy a new home. I would predict that one day we will look back at the time today when about 65 million people are displaced in our world from war and from climate change, and we will begin to think of these as the good old days. It's enough to make you give up. And I'm not going to propose a political action agenda that is guaranteed to fix the severe illness to which our earth has fallen prey as a result of our terrible human power. I'm not going to tick off all of the steps that are necessary to turn the world around. Huge sigh of relief from the congregation. I want to talk about what is in our power right here, the power each one of us has to make small changes. Our earth is sacred. In the words attributed to Chief Noah Silf, whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. Our earth is sacred. Let's try to live into that reality, that experience of the pulsing of life in all parts of our Mother Earth. Our world is being transformed before our eyes in ways that are devastating to all of life, including human life. We need to work for a world transformed by our care, not by our carelessness. So let me suggest just one simple spiritual practice for each of us to start from, a tiny step on a very long journey. Let me suggest that each of you take a vow to make some specific change in your daily life that will remind you each day that the earth is sacred and that each of us has the terrible power to respect or to destroy that sacredness. It could be a very, very simple vow. One of my vows has been to avoid any beverage that comes out of an aluminum can. Years ago, I saw a graph plotting the consumption of soda versus the consumption of milk. I noticed it because I grew up on a dairy farm. I'm not trying to push milk. But I decided that I didn't want to be part of creating that enormous mountain of aluminum waste that the consumption of soda caused. And there are lots of other side effects to soda consumption as well, but I was just thinking about the aluminum. And I like having this vow because it serves as a little tiny limitation of my choices, a regular reminder that I'm not free to eat and drink as I please, that I'm just a little part of the web of life. Some folks have become vegetarians or vegans, realizing that the consumption of meat consumes enormous resources. Maybe you could vow never to drink water from a plastic bottle and instead use a reusable bottle. These vows, these little vows, are just reminders to us to pay attention to the sacredness of the earth. I never understood why people eat kosher. I never got it that these rules made sense. And I finally came to understand that they are a way of making us aware every time we eat that there's something sacred about it. So maybe there's some small way that would affect you every day that could bring your awareness to that sacredness. When we become aware and remind ourselves every day, we begin to look around us and to extend that caring to our common space. We choose here in this place to be a green sanctuary and to figure out how all of us can commit to minimizing our impact on the earth. We've committed to using solar power here at First Parish from the solar farm in Uxbridge, and we've encouraged members of our congregation to do the same. Have any of you signed up besides me? Yeah, that's great. Some of us are active in advocating a ban on plastic bags in this community. These are all tiny steps. They won't turn back the sea or stop global warming. What they do is to transform our own awareness of how our actions affect the web of all existence. They empower us to spread awareness around us that our earth is sacred. So let us embody and help to make that awareness pervasive. And we need to celebrate that sacredness. We need to actively love the earth and to show it. Mary Oliver speaks of this in The Poet Comments on Yet Another Approaching Spring. Don't flowers put on their prettiness each spring and go to it with everything they've got? Who would criticize a bed of yellow tulips or the blue hyacinths? So put a bracelet on your ankle with a bell on it and make a little music for the earth beneath your feet. Or wear a hat with hot-colored ribbons for the pleasure of the leaves and the clouds. Or at least a ring with a gleaming stone on your finger. Yesterday, I watched a mother choose exquisite ear ornaments for someone beloved in the spring of her life. They were for her, for sure, but also it seemed a promise, a love message, a commitment to all girls and boys too, so beautiful and hopeful in this hard world and young. Let us embody that sacredness. Blessed be, and amen. Please take out your hymnals and turn to number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth, number 21. Please stand as you're willing and able. Why don't we just, we're into singing today, Tony. Let's just sing. Please stand as you're willing. Now in our going, may the Spirit of life and love bless and keep us. May the light of that Spirit shine upon us and out from within us, and be gracious unto us, and bring us peace. For this is the day that we are given, and this is the earth that we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in them. Amen. Let's join together in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please be seated.
Please sing with me. I'm sure that you will know this song. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, bright blessed day, dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also in the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're mostly saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They're learning more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful